Good morning, everybody. So today I'm gonna do on the youngest person that was unalive by the state, or unalive by the state in which he lived. Now, I've been trying to sort out the story for a long time to bring it forward as well, because I feel because of how young he is, it also puts me in mind of a lot of historical things that has happened in America, particularly when it comes to um, injustices of people of color, particularly. Now, the reason why I brought him forward because every single time it's like when something keeps calling you, sort of thing, like you need to talk about them. I feel he needs to be spoken about. However, because of how young he was as well, I feel that yes, I need to talk about him. So if anybody's around and want to join in, you can come and join in as well in the chat. So what I'm gonna put him up. Hold on, let me okay. So let's go with start his story.
You can now get daily emails with our calendar. On June 16, 1944, George Stinney Jr., a 90-pound black 14-year-old boy, was executed in the electric chair in Columbia, South Carolina. 3 months earlier, on March 24, George and his sister were playing in their yard when two young white girls briefly approached and asked where they could find flowers. Hours later, the girls failed to return home, and a search party was organized to find them. George joined the search party and casually mentioned to a bystander that he had seen the girls earlier. The following morning, their dead bodies were found in a shallow ditch. George was immediately arrested for the murders and subjected to hours of interrogation without his parents or an attorney. The sheriff later claimed that George confessed to the murders, though no written or signed statement was presented. George's father was fired from his job, and his family was forced to flee amidst threats on their lives. On March 26, a mob attempted to lynch George, but he had already been moved to an out-of-town jail. On April 24, George Stinney faced a sham trial virtually alone. No African Americans were allowed inside the courthouse, and his court-appointed attorney, a tax lawyer with political aspirations, failed to call a single witness. The prosecution presented the sheriff's testimony regarding George's alleged confession as the only evidence of his guilt. An all-white jury deliberated for 10 minutes before convicting George Stinney of murder, and the judge promptly sentenced the 14-year-old to death. Despite appeals from black advocacy groups, Governor Olin Johnston refused to intervene. George Stinney remains the youngest person executed in the U.S. in the 20th century. 70 years later, a South Carolina judge held a two-day hearing, which included testimony from 3 of George's surviving siblings, members of the search party, and several experts. The state argued at the hearing that despite all the unfairness in this case, George's conviction should stand. The trial court disagreed and vacated the conviction, finding that George Stinney was fundamentally deprived of due process throughout the proceedings against him, that the alleged confession simply cannot be said to be known and voluntary, that the court-appointed attorney did little to nothing to defend George, and that his representation was the essence of being ineffective. The judge concluded, "I can think of no greater injustice." Learn more here. About EJI. The Equal Justice Initiative works to end mass incarceration, excessive punishment, and racial inequality. Learn more. Until we confront our history of racial injustice and its legacy, we cannot overcome the racial bias that exists today. Learn.
Right. So let me see. There's another one that I pulled up from him. Oh, what's George Skinny is also represented in a movie as well. Now, I don't know whether you can guess which movie he was represented in the movie. Um, and also, people who's going to watch the replay, if you can think of what movie he was represented in, um, that then if the chat gets there before you, I'll put it forward. Hi, Hood Therapies. So this young man obviously was is an injustice. It's like an injustice. He had no parents there at his trial, um, which is really sad. He didn't have a chance at all. Uh, Even to how the execution went through was crazy. They said it looked terrible when he was electrocuted. It was one of the worst ever. You know what I'm saying? Because of his size and everything else to go with it. Let me see if I could show. I don't know if I can show it, but let's see if I can show it. If I can show it, let me see if I can show it. Hold on a minute. Right, let me see if I can show one of it. But if you know the what you call it, the film that depicted him. Oh, there's one on his funeral. Oh, it's very sad when you hear these stories. He was a very small boy. Even in the picture, you can see how small, how tiny he is in the ground. You know, let me see if I can raise this one. Is it playing? It's not playing. It's not playing. Okay. I don't know why that one's not playing. No. Okay. I think I'm going to do it my way. Let me do it my way. Okay. So I'm going to show the funeral, the memorial, and the family. Let me see.
Teen boy executed for murder of two girls 70 years ago gets a memorial.
He got a memorial.
Friday, June 13th, 2014, 20:52 and 34 seconds GMT. Supporters of George Stinney, Jr., have erected a memorial for him on 3 acres off of Sumter Highway in the Alcolu community of Clarendon County. Stinney, who was 14, was convicted and put to death by the electric chair on June 16, 1944 for the murders of two girls ages 7 and 11 in the Alcolu community of Clarendon County. Their bodies were found on March 24, 1944. Stinney was arrested the same day. George Frierson of Alcolu got involved in the case in 2004 after researching old news articles of what happened. As far as I'm concerned, this child was murdered. There is nothing to justify the actions of South Carolina in regards to this case, said Frierson. Empty heading. Play this game for 1 minute and see why everyone is addicted. Navy Quest game. Frierson said Stinney confessed, but that he was coerced. He also points out that the trial lasted 2.5 hours without testimony from Stinney. Earlier this year, a circuit court judge heard arguments on whether a new trial should be granted for Stinney. But she has yet to reach a decision. Frierson believes the memorial will serve as a lasting reminder of what happened to Stinney. He'll never be forgotten. He was of God's creatures. What happened to him should have never happened, but it did. And 70 years later we are still remembering his life, he said. Timothy Miller, a Stinney supporter, believes the memorial is in an appropriate place since it's where Stinney lived for the 14 years that he was alive. Everything surrounding this happened in Alcolu, South Carolina. And so this was a fitting place for this to be, said Miller. Another Stinney supporter, Jerome Dupree, said George Stinney was someone I always felt so terrible about. Being a baby, not being able to defend himself. And I feel we adults have a responsibility to do what we can to make sure that he rest in peace and that we show our concern in fighting for justice for George Stinney. The memorial dedication is set for Saturday, June 14th, at 5 p.m.
Right. There's also the family. I think this is the family. Let's see if it's got music. Okay. I ain't got music on it. Great. Okay. Okay, let me get this off there. In case one of my children come and interrupt, because that always happens. Okay. So I'm going to show, I think this is his family.
I wrote a story on his life when they were executing him. And had not for that, we wouldn't know anything.
Right,
Nothing.
right.
They said, how much do you believe the press? Well, the press.
4, 3, 2, 1.
The circus at the South Carolina State Fair returning for...
Hold on a minute. Don't you hate when that happens? You're playing something important and then something else pops up. Otherwise, I'll do it this way instead. If there's going to be interruptions, I want to do it this way, the way I was doing it before. Because that's annoying. Okay.
The circus at the South Carolina State Fair returning for a 6th season with the theme.
It keeps doing that. I don't know why. Let me see if I can get another version of it. That's annoying. Let's get the memorial. We got the memorial. Oh, I wanted to hear the family talk as well. Oh, it's gone. Oh, anyway, if I have to cut that bit out, that's fine. I'll just cut it out. They're interrupting the flow. But yeah, this is a very sad story. For how long I've been seeing his little face pop up. They said it was one of the worst executions carried out in America, because first they had to put him on books, a stack of books. Then they had to fit the thing to his head at a time, because it was the time when they used to do like fit the things to the head, cover the face. I think there was a problem with the covering or something, and there was a whole witness to how bad he was executed. He's one of the worst cases of execution of the time. That's why I was like, wow, like when you see how small he is in size and stature, he's not a big child in body. And I don't know whether they're gonna try and get something from this, because it doesn't matter how long ago it was. It doesn't matter how long ago it was. It is the fact that he was so little. He was so small. I think there's more anyway.
1944, the 14-year-old African-American teenager by the name of George Stinney Jr. became the youngest person ever to face capital punishment in the United States. Today, we're going to talk about his story. And if you like stories like this, you can find more stories like family lived in company housing provided to them by the sawmill. March 23rd, 1944, two young girls, 11-year-old Betty June Binneker and 7-year-old Mary Emma Thanes, were riding their bicycles looking for flowers when they saw George and his sister Amy during their journey. They stopped to ask them if they knew where they could find maypops, which is a yellow edible fruit. It will be the last time that either of them were seen alive. Their disappearance prompted hundreds of residents, including George Stinney's father, to come together and search for the two missing girls, but the girls would not be located until the following day when their bodies were discovered in a ditch. According to the medical examiner, both girls suffered blunt force trauma caused by an unknown weapon. While specifics of what happened that day remain unknown, a rumor floated around town that the girls had made a stop at a prominent white family's home on the day of the murder. But none of this had ever been confirmed, and police certainly never looked for a white killer. When it was reported that the girls had passed by the property of the family home earlier in the day and were seen talking to George Stinney later that evening, Clarendon County law enforcement came to the home. George and his elder sibling John were both apprehended by Deputy H.S. Newman for allegedly murdering the two girls. George was interrogated for hours in a small room without his parents or attorney. Despite the Sixth Amendment's assurance of legal counsel, this requirement was not consistently enforced in the United States until the Supreme Court decided in the ruling of Gideon versus Wainwright in 1963 that legal representation needed to be provided throughout a criminal proceeding. Stinney then was reported to have confessed to Deputy Newman. Newman wrote in a handwritten statement that I arrested a boy by the name of George Stinney. He made a confession and told me where to find a piece of iron about 15 inches long. He put it in a ditch about 6 feet from the bicycle. John was then dismissed by police, but George was held under guardianship and was not granted contact.
The thing is that how, right, so like, this coerce word comes up a lot. I feel that how the boy would have said anything to get out of that situation. One, he's young, right? When you put someone in a situation as young as this, they will say anything to get out of it. They would say they did something when they didn't do nothing. And I feel this is what this story is about mostly. He didn't even have the rights to even waiver so that his parents can be there. Nothing could all. He was not given a chance at all. And back then, during the Jim Crow times, as we know it, it was something else. Them times, nobody of color had a chance to waiver or to say or to have the rights to of justice. There was a lot of injustices around them times. So, yeah, I'm just like, It's just crazy to me.
Contact with his parents. Following his arrest, his father was promptly fired from his job at the sawmill. Therefore, the Stinney family had to vacate their company housing. The family was also fearful for their well being because the threat of lynching was a very real threat. Furthermore, Stinney's parents never saw him before his trial, leaving him without any type of support during the 81 days of his incarceration. The 14-year-old would then be taken to a jail in Columbia, South Carolina, almost 50 miles away from Alcu due to the threat of him being lynched.
Yeah, can you
April
imagine?
24th, 1944, George Stinney Jr.'s trial would begin. Charles Plowden, Stinney's court appointed attorney, was campaigning for a local office and did little to nothing to defend his client. Thus, he did not challenge the three officers' testimony that Stinney had confessed to the two murders. The prosecution then provided two separate versions of Stinney's verbal confession, one in which he allegedly helped one of the girls who had fallen in the ditch and ended up killing them in self defense. In the second version, reportedly, Stinney followed the girls before initially attacking Emma Thanes, then Betty June. All documents containing Stinney's confession were limited to Deputy Newman's account of the murders. The prosecution then called three witnesses: Reverend Francis Batson, who discovered the victims' bodies, and two doctors who had completed post mortem examination. The court acknowledges bruising on the victim's private area raised the possibility of sexual assault. Stinney's defense counsel did not cross examine any of the witnesses or present any witnesses of their own. The entire trial lasted just 2.5 hours. More than 1,000 people attended the trial in the courtroom, but no African Americans were admitted. By the time of the trial, Stinney had not seen his parents in weeks, and the 14-year-old was surrounded in the courtroom by strangers. He was then tried before an all white jury, since most African Americans in southern states were excluded from jury rolls. After deliberation of less than 10 minutes, the jury declared Stinney guilty of murder. Judge Philip H. Stoll then sentenced him to death via electric chair. Remarkably, no appeal was ever submitted on Stinney's behalf. George Stinney Jr. execution was not without protest, though. The NAACP, Stinney's family, and the local churches all petitioned Governor Olin D. Johnston to show mercy to the 14-year-old defendant. Thousands of letters and telegraphs were sent in an attempt to plead for justice based on both basic fairness and Christian values. On June 14th, just 2 days before his scheduled execution, the governor visited George Stinney Jr. In his statement, the governor mentions George Stinney confessing to killing the girls in order to sexually assault the other. It's only after this that Stinney's parents were granted visitation to the youth while he was being held in a Columbia penitentiary, and this was only due to the danger of a potential lynching. June 16th, 1944, George Stinney Jr. entered the execution chamber of the South Carolina State Penitentiary in Columbia with a Bible tucked under his arm. Weighing just 95 pounds, the young boy was dressed in an ill fitting striped jumpsuit. He jumped into an adult sized electric chair that was difficult for him to fit in. And when he was asked if he had any last words, George simply and calmly replied, "No, sir." A mask was placed over his face, but it was too big to fit properly. At 7:30 in the morning, officials flipped on the current, and George Stinney was pronounced dead. And shortly thereafter, he would be buried in an unmarked grave in Crowley, South Carolina. In a span of 83 days, George Stinney Jr. had been charged with murder, tried, convicted, and executed by the state. In the aftermath, in 2004, George Ferguson, a local historian in Alco, South Carolina, had read an article about the George Stinney Jr. case. After researching the case, Ferguson received assistance from South Carolina lawyers Steve McKenzie and Matt Burgess. The family of George Stinney Jr. continued to contend that his confession had been coerced and he had been with his sister at the time of the murders. Additionally, George Stinney's cellmate, Johnny Hunter, asserted that Stinney had denied any involvement in the deaths of Beneker and Thanes, and Hunter attests that he said, "Johnny, I didn't do it. I didn't do it. Why would they kill me for something that I didn't do?" McKenzie and Burgess would then file a motion for a new trial in 2013. December 16, 2014, Circuit Court Judge Carmen Mullen vacated Stinney's conviction, ruling that his confession was most likely coerced. He was not properly defended, and his Sixth Amendment rights had been violated, and the execution of the 14-year-old Stinney constituted cruel and unusual punishment. Thank you. This has been One Mike Black History. I'm your host, Country Boy. If you like stories like this, you can find more stories like this
Are you a woman in your 40s or 50s who've been
in 1944 like it was yesterday.
This particular day, I went to the beauty parlor with my brother Charles, and my sister Amy stayed home with George. And when we came back, we met her on the road, and she said that George had been taken away. So, taken away by who? Some men came in the car and took him away. And that was the last. I never saw him again.
Police arrested 14-year-old George in connection with the murder
I think it's playing up now. Okay, if this doesn't come true properly, I'll have to
of two young girls. About an hour later, a deputy announced George had confessed to the murders. His trial lasted less than a day and resulted in George being sent to the electric chair, making him the youngest person in the nation to be executed during the 20th century. His family and supporters gathered Monday, June 16th, to commemorate the exact day that George was executed 70 years ago.
It makes the world aware that some atrocity went on years ago, and maybe make the people who did the crime and their families realize that they knew about it and didn't say anything about it. They just let it slide.
And even though George Stinney's trial was 70 years ago, legal advocates today have still not given up on his cause, and they're hoping that a South Carolina judge will soon issue a symbolic verdict. Lawyers in Sumter County began a motion for a new trial for Stinney. The NAACP then approached Midland's attorney Joe McCullough to lend a hand to the fight. McCullough agreed after researching the case and seeing the injustice he believes was done.
Our request is not for this judge to exonerate George Stinney. There's not enough record left to do that. But I think there is plenty of record to demonstrate and to persuade this judge, we hope, that the process was so flawed, so unfair to George Stinney or anyone, that the court should and can grant a new trial.
But since the original trial happened so long ago, a full-blown redo is not going to happen, but the judge's decision in the matter will serve as a symbolic gesture.
Now, clearly there can't be a new trial, but a grant of a new trial simply announces that this was not a fair process. It doesn't exonerate George Stinney. And history will have to record that he was accused of the murder, but not convicted if this motion is granted.
But for now, George's sister still replays in her mind the lines she read that George wrote to the family while he was in prison before his execution.
All he said in the letters, this thing that he accusing me of, I am not guilty. That's it.
In Columbia, Stephanie Helling, Watch Fox News.
The third generation of silicone dentures
close. Actually, I think we're about 25 minutes away from the grave of the youngest boy, or the youngest person to be sentenced to death by electric chair. He was 14 years old, and it took about 70 years before his conviction was overturned. We're going to go to his grave today, and we're going to talk about his case. This is the story of George Stinney Jr. Days with Jordan the Lion begins right now. This is a very interesting corner. There's a dilapidated ABC grocery store, and right catty corner from it is a disco club. Just not what I was expecting on the back roads in South Carolina. A disco club. No more paved road. So George Stinney Jr. was buried out here in an unmarked grave. Now I don't know why maybe they didn't keep records of where he was buried, or maybe for the safety of maybe somebody coming desecrating the grave or doing something, maybe they keep it private, but they have erected a memorial to his wrongful conviction. So let's go see that. It's about 20 minutes away in his hometown. So the memorial's in a town called Alcolu, and that's the town that all of this situation that George ended up being accused of happened. This was the town that he lived in. It was segregated, of course, at the time, and literally they had railroad tracks that divided the black neighborhood and the white neighborhood. His father worked at the local mill, and because of that, the mill gave them a house to live in. So right here by a busy road, very surprising place for George's headstone. Maybe this is a family house back here, but this is the official headstone for George Stinney Jr. You can see it says, wrongfully convicted, illegally executed by South Carolina, conviction vacated by court order dated December 16th, 2014. So what happened was George lived in this town, and one day he and his sister were walking back from grazing their cattle and were approached by two young girls, two sisters, an 11-year-old and a 9-year-old, and they asked if they knew where they could find maypops, which were it was like a fruit. And so George and his sister Amy told them that they could find them close to the railroad tracks, and that was, pretty much it for George. However, what ended up happening was the two girls ended up going missing, and when they didn't come home that night, a search party was started, and they went out looking and looking, and then by dawn, the bodies were found in a ditch, and their heads had been caved in with what they thought was either a railroad spike or a hammer or something like that. And George had offered some help when the search party was out looking. He said that he and his sister had saw them and told them where they could find maypops. So he immediately became accused. He was accused of killing them, even though his sister Amy could vouch that she was with him the whole day. He had an alibi. So the police ended up taking he and his brother into custody. They ended up letting his brother go, but they continued to accuse George, and without an attorney, without his parents. He was 14 years old, and they were questioning him about a murder, and it was an all-white police force, and they said that, they were continuously bludgeoning questions at him and basically demanded a confession. So he ended up confessing, and they sent it to trial. Now, as you can imagine, during this day, he did not get a fair trial. In fact, the jury was all white men. His court-appointed attorney was running for election, never ended up calling any witnesses, never cross-examined anyone, never questioned any of the evidence that was presented, and they found George guilty within 10 minutes of deliberation. It's mind-boggling to think that with zero evidence that you could get not only a conviction, but the death penalty. And that's what he got. He was the youngest person to ever be sentenced to death. Even his cellmate would be questioned later on. He said George maintained his innocence his entire time. He said that he was forced to confess and that he never did it. A reverend in their town was the one who found the two girls' bodies. And he said when he found them in the muddy ditch, there wasn't that much blood. And so he kind of had the idea that they weren't killed there, that they were put there. Now, what's crazy about this story is that the two girls, there's a theory that the two girls stopped by a wealthy family's house on the way to invite the woman of the house to go maypop looking with them. And that she wasn't home, but that her son invited or offered to give them a ride in his truck. And the bodies were found on that family's land, not the house that they lived on, but land that they owned in town. So there's been a theory that has popped up since that believes that their son, who may have given the two girls a ride, was who did it, because there's supposedly a deathbed confession from him. Now, George, this was horrible. The family then became in town, a public enemy. His father lost their job, so then they were thrown out of their home. People were wanting to come after them. They had to hold George about 30 minutes away because they were afraid if they kept him in town, he'd be lynched. Unbelievable.
The Jim Crow era was one of the worst times in American history. I've just found something to do with race and capital punishment, because this is one of the things that I feel George went through. I'm going to play it. Hold up.
Race and capital punishment in the United States. Further information, capital punishment in the United States. The relationship between race and capital punishment in the United States has been studied extensively. As of 2014, 42% of those on death row in the United States were black. As of October 2002, there were 12 executions of white defendants where the murder victim was black. However, there were 178 executed defendants who were black with a white murder victim. Since then, the number of white defendants executed where the murder victim was black has increased to just 21, less than 1.36% of all executions, whereas the number of black defendants executed where the murder victim was white has increased to 299, nearly 19.4% of all executions. 54% of people wrongfully convicted and sentenced to death in the United States are black. Approximately 13.5% of death row inmates are of Hispanic or Latino descent. In 2019, individuals identified as Hispanic and Latino Americans accounted for 5.5% of homicides. Hispanic and Latino Americans make up 19% of the total U.S. population. Wrongful execution. False execution redirects here. For the situation where a person falsely believes they will be executed, see mock execution. Wrongful execution is a miscarriage of justice occurring when an innocent person is put to death by capital punishment. Opponents of capital punishment often cite cases of wrongful execution as arguments, while proponents argue that innocence concerns the credibility of the justice system as a whole and does not solely undermine the use of the death penalty. A variety of individuals are claimed to have been innocent victims of the death penalty. Newly available DNA evidence has allowed the exoneration and release of more than 20 death row inmates since 1992 in the United States, but DNA evidence is available in only a fraction of capital cases. At least 190 people who were sentenced to death in the United States have been exonerated and released since 1973, with official misconduct and perjury/false accusation the leading causes of their wrongful convictions. The Death Penalty Information Center, U.S., has published a partial listing of wrongful executions that, as of the end of 2020, identified 20 death row prisoners who were executed but possibly innocent. Judicial murder is a type of wrongful execution. Specific examples: edit. Australia, edit. Colin Campbell Ross was.
Okay, so that one's just going to talk about Australian people who's been executed. Well, this is kind of the size of the time that which George was born into, you know. It's a time when like a man can be taken off the road or taken out their houses and lynched and all that stuff. This is the time that George was born into. So therefore, right, there was no justice for him at all whatsoever. Him being only very young in age or whatever, innocently giving directions to two white girls, and then he ends up on death row. So, like I said, I'm hoping that there will be things going on surrounding his death, you know what I mean? Yeah, let me see. I think there is 83 Days is a movie of the true story of George. 83 Days. The current story of George Stinney, Skinny, Steph. Let me see if there's more. I'm gonna just seeing if there's more stuff on him because there might be something I've missed. Okay, I'm going to share that one to the community tab, right, as it's linked to him. That's called The Current. I think that's one of the movies with his story in it. Let me see if there's anything else. Is there anything else? Yeah, I don't think there's nothing else on here, unfortunately. Don't think there's anything else. But it is a sad story to do this little guy here. You know, right. I hope they do find him exonerate his story. Hi, Lisa. I do think that it's important that his story is told. I think to myself, just telling his story is something, you know. He was only young, like he's a baby. 13-year-olds are very pre-teens. They are still just coming into the next milestone of life, and the fact that he was with his sister all that time and they didn't even take into effect or think. But then again, like I said, those times was during the Jim Crow times, like, you know what I mean. And I have a great understanding for a great thing for American history, you know. Oh yeah, thank you. I have a great thing for American history. I mean, I have a thing for my history, your history, his story. His story is very, 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 very important because it just shows how easy they can put something on a young person, and I feel that those times are not left. They're still there in America. You know what I mean? As much as people think that America's changing and stuff like that, no. There is a lot going on in America. Sometimes even I, from the UK, is shocked. I think Masilis was the biggest one for me at this present time. I've been trying to get to work on a video to do with this young George here for a while. Can never get it out. Like, as I'm listening to all the other stuff, well, I've been in Lisa's chat, I just decided I'm going to put out his story like this. I was meant to do it differently. So I've done it this way because I feel like he needs a little bit more than just a video, like a video just put out. He needs a live, he needs a whole time spent on him. Like the memorial, I don't know whether they're doing stuff to get justice for him, because it's never too late. There are pictures of cops handcuffing little black. Yeah, I've seen those. That's what I'm saying. It hasn't changed. It hasn't changed. It's to put fear into people, children, whatever. I mean, I have seen pictures of that. I have. And I don't doubt for a minute. I mean, I always correlate some of the stuff what happens in America to over here, because there is definitely kind of a similarity in certain stuff, okay? And this is why, as much as I am from the UK, I want people to understand that I understand the plight in general. It's like, like this young man here didn't even get a chance to say goodbye to his family. The execution was a bit botched. Okay, it was a bit botched. He sat on a Bible because he was very little. He sat on a Bible. He's scared at this point. He's in tears. There is a video of him in tears where they depict him. I feel that the movie Green Mile is actually of a botched execution. And I feel that's exactly how it would have happened, to be straight with you. You know, the smell of the body, all that stuff, and the fact that how they had to give him an unmarked grave in case he got desecrated by people. They had to move him around so that a lynch mob couldn't get him. He's only little. He's only small. You know what I'm saying? It's one of those. But yeah, I'll say, remembering this young man, I feel many others need to cover him. However you do the video, you know what I'm saying? Just talking about him is bringing him to life. You know what I'm saying? And if you believe in ancestors and ancestry, just talking about him, bringing him to life, even if the story's on repeat, it doesn't matter. Yeah, I'm working on a project right now, but when I'm done, we can work on some black. Well, I don't really stay on certain stuff. I'll be on a few things. I'm not collaborating with nobody really as much as I was before. And it's not like, and I'm not saying that I won't collaborate with people. I just don't feel like at this present time, I'm not collaborating with nobody. I kind of like how I am right now at this present moment. Bringing forward certain stories to me is what fulfills me as a person. When you know about certain things, right, is when you help yourself, right? And like whether there is a link to it or not a link to it, it doesn't matter. It's the story at hand. And I don't pretend to know everything neither, but at the same time, this one here really touched me. There's some stuff that I put up and they really touch me, and I do put them up and I really go in sometimes, and other times I just put them up and I don't say a lot. I let them talk for themselves, because it's important that they tell their story. And that's why when I cover certain things, I cover it for reasons, right? Because, like, you know, I believe in Sankofa. I believe in a lot of stuff, and a lot of people disagree with what I believe in sometimes. And I don't intend to spoil. Not that I'm saying you're going to spoil it. I don't intend to put nothing in the works of what Ocean is doing right now, because certain things is brought up for a reason, and she wants them brought forward for a reason, okay? Or Ocean. She wants them brought up for a reason. So it's to throw them into the limelight. However, when I do certain things, there's reasons why I do it. And it's not to have a dig at nobody, okay? It's just in general. That's just how I feel. I'm a loner anyway, in real life. So I'm fine where I'm at right now. Yeah. So basically his story needed to be told. I've been trying to work on his story for the past month. I've been trying to work on the video. The video didn't want to be brought out like that. He wants to be live. He wants people to know his story. That's what he wants at this present moment. And I'm not saying that I'm channeling him and all this. I feel that when a certain story presents itself, they want you to tell people their story. They want you to tell their story. It's not about whether it's trending or whatever. They want it to be known. Yeah. And that's what I believe with some of these things what I bring forward. So yeah. So George, I mean, there's been others. He's not the only one. You know what I mean? Right? The reason why his story is so unique is because of his age. That's the only thing. But there were others that's been through this, what he went through. Right? An all-white jury. There's no black peers. Your family can't see you. A lynching mob is also trying to get at you. You know what I'm saying? History is crazy. Yeah. Sometimes you sit down, you read something, and you just say, damn. How they live through them times, I don't know. And they survived. Some of them survived, some of them didn't survive. And some of their families is able to tell their stories as well. That's why I would love to know I would love to have a chat with his family. You know what I'm saying? For real. With this one, yeah, I will talk to his family for real. Right. But, you know, being I am where I am and they are where they are, and I don't go digging too deep for certain stuff. I like I mean, he's not at peace. That's what I see. He ain't at peace. Right? He ain't at peace. His life was taken away because of his color and his race and environment to which he was in. That's where it stands at right now. And the reason why I showed that guy going to it is the distance. You see how far the roads are? That's dusty roads and far. Even the church, how far the church is. It puts me in mind of when you watch certain movies and you see them walking on these long roads to churches and certain places to school and all sorts of things. And then you get a couple hotheads who wants to unalive you at the same process, you know. And I know there's records of these that's around, so I'm not even just talking off my chest. May he be remembered a lot in so many ways. You know, I always say to people to put flowers where the resting places of these people are. It's important to put flowers on where these resting people are, where these people are where they at. It's important. It's you know, There is a man that I need to bring forward where he is doing works where he's also going to places where people are unalive unjustly. You know, it's like, you know, anyways, I don't want to, I'm getting ahead of myself. But yeah, I just thought I'd bring his story forward. Please listen to his story. And if you can bring his story forward, you bring it forward. If 50 people do it, even better. 40 people do it, even better. 100 people rekindle that fire. You know, like get in touch with the family. I don't even know where you can get in touch with the family. I don't even know. I don't know. I'm not even thinking that too deeply. You know, yeah, that's how I see it at this present moment. But he wanted to be spoken about. He definitely wanted to be spoken about. I was distracted so much time, and I kept coming back and saying, "Yeah, I'm gonna put him up. I'm gonna put him up." Today is the day for him to be spoken about, and like, yeah. So even though my video was buffering and doing the most at the same, I'm still glad I've got his story out, regardless. Right? Because 13, I mean, I used to have a 13-year-old boy. And back in those days, they saw these young boys as threats. That they will grow and they will be rebellious and they'll be rambunctious and there'll be this and there'll be that and there'll be this. And they will get them at a very young age. You know, they will, you know, and they're still doing it now. Okay, it's still doing it now. So history is still carrying on, still continuing. Say might as well. History is still continuing now. It's still continuing to this day, whether you're in UK, America, wherever. Okay. And that's why I feel that there should be no division across the pond, over the pond, wherever, however people mention it. Because there was a lot of stuff that happened over here too. Yeah, I think I did cover a couple of it. But there's been a lot of stuff that's happened over where people's demises because of skin color alone. All right. So, yeah, Black history is world history. It is. And I mean, I don't know if I'll be doing any more historical stuff. I don't know. Because, like, you know, I could say that and then I could come back and I can do something totally different. So who knows? But yeah, there is a lot of stuff. I mean, I've done a little story on black cake, and that history was similar to my grandmother's history a little bit, like, you know, the works that they did. So yeah, I believe in it. You know what I mean? As art history, because there are black people all over the globe. Yes, there is. And it's more opened up now because they weren't even allowed to read. They weren't allowed to do so much things. If you watch, there's a picture, there's a video, there's a film with Dorothy Bainbridge, and I forgot Makeba's husband, and they show that side of the Jim Crow. You literally see the classroom. You can see the time. You can see the era in which it's set. Okay, so I would say I can't remember what's it called. Can't remember off the top of my head right now. But what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna stop because I don't want it to go on and on and on, and I don't want to be repeating myself. I put out a poll, and yeah. So if I have to come back to him, I will come back to him. You know what I mean? If I have to re-put him back up again, I'll put him back up again. But in time, he will let me know when he wants to come back out again, because, you know, he's a child. You know what I mean? Children's spirits are different to adult spirits. You know what I'm saying? And like I say, I ain't playing to be, you know, that I can see spirits and I'm channeling them. No, they know. They will let you know when they need to come out and be known and be heard. And like, it's a shame that how he passed at such a young age. because of race. He showed some girls directions. They asked him about some flowers or something. And yeah, so if you know the movie where this is linked to as well, even better, right? So yeah, so let me just see. I did see hood horrors here. Lisa says, "What the story is very heartbreaking." Yes, it is very heartbreaking. I read your dedication to history. Yeah, there are pictures of cops handcuffing little children. Yeah, I've seen those. I'm working on a project now. Well done. Okay. I understand. You are preserving history. Black history is world history because there are black people all over the globe. Yeah, there is. Yeah, there is. So basically, I'm gonna leave it there. I'm not gonna go into no speech or nothing because the video speaks for itself. I don't need to say nothing else, right? Please comment, leave a candle underneath underneath this live, particularly. I keep asking people to just put a little candle underneath certain videos because it's important that you do it. To me, it's important. It's like a memorial kind of space, you can say. Because to be honest, if I was able, I will go to there's certain places I wish I could go to, you know what I mean, in America particularly. Certain places I wish I can go to in England particularly. There's loads of places where people were sold and brought over here too. Okay. But in time, if it's so, it will be so. But yeah, just put a candle underneath his picture, a flame, whatever, flowers. Think of it like that, because he died very young, very, very young, a baby. That's how I see him. He's a baby. I'm soon 50, and he, right, I think he probably would have been one of my youngers. Who knows? You know what I'm saying? It's beyond whatever. It's beyond everything else. So but please do that, and I'm not gonna prolong it. I'm not gonna repeat myself. I promise myself I'm gonna try not to repeat myself because I do it a lot. I don't mean to, but that's how I talk. So thank you for coming here, coming around. I have other stuff to do myself, and sometimes I forget, and I come back. But with this one, nah. So this was just on the spur of the moment. I had to do this one, okay? Because like I said, on Saturdays, I don't really try not to broadcast too much on a Saturday. But yeah. So with that said, I will see you. Take care. Just think of your peoples from the past. You know what I'm saying? If you can research them. Some of us can't research our people because it gets lost along some next place. And yeah, I'm just about to go back into another place again. But with that said, I will see you in the next one. Take care. Bye.